is not my problem. I can't fix that. You know what I can fix? Corruption in Cameroon is not Canada's problem. You know what your problem is? That you can fix? Tariffs, protectionism, subsidies that do not allow these farmers to come in here. That's what you can fix. Why don't you focus on what you can fix? You can't fix corruption over there. As long as we do not move the authority and the responsibility of these government leaders in the hands of the people of these countries, nothing will ever change. I mean, we saw this, the whole aid money, government to government aid, and government aid goes to the charities and NGOs and it goes over there. All that does is destroy democracy. Because all of these leaders that have been there for 30 years, they're as corrupt as up to here, they're supported by our behavior here, not over there. The guy who's going to cheat, he's going to have his comeuppance, I guarantee you. They'll take care of that. Now, why don't we take care of what we need to take care of here? And that doesn't even include us having to go to Cameroon. We can fix that here. We have a way in humanity to abdicate responsibility. We don't want responsibility. Especially moral responsibility. We like to abdicate it whenever we can so that we don't have to make uncomfortable decisions. That's why we abdicate to Tom's shoes. We buy a ticket. You know, I thought this is the 500-year anniversary of Luther, isn't it? I thought we got rid of indulgences. You know, we do indulgences. Our whole society does indulgences. We throw a little there, we throw a little there, and we buy ourselves a clear conscience. But you know what? No company can be an agent of morality, of moral action. No government can be an agent of moral action because they're not persons. You're moral actors. So act morally. Every time you buy something, every time you vote, every time you don't buy something or do or not do something, are moral actions that last. What we do is we abdicate this. And we love to abdicate it to the government and to big companies. And then the government and the big companies, they start to collude with each other and they start to get out of control. And then the little guy, which is actually us, which is, you know, whenever you catch one alone, we're all the little guy, but we've all abdicated the responsibility of the food chain. And then the little guy gets abused or falls under the control and sees the big government and big business doing all of these things like the rice deal and all of that stuff. And that's all because we gave up the responsibility. So if we want to take this back, I just want to give you a quick picture. And there we agree on the system. Africa has 12% of humanity. Yet Africa receives 30% of all the charity in the world. 12% of the people on this planet get 30% of all the charity in the world. And the business that I was in with the 7 funds was to do risk capital. There's risk capital running around the world saying, hey, do you have a good opportunity to invest in? I want to do this startup stuff like I do with software. They say, I want high risk, give me a high risk opportunity. That money ends up being in foreign direct investment, this risk capital that runs around the globe. Only 1.4% of that finds its way to Africa. To me, that is the exhibit number 1 of what I think is systemically wrong with us, with this. And part of this, and we talked before, I try to, many of these entrepreneurs are friends of mine, and I try to learn from them and see, even as a business opportunity, what to do. And we started, a couple of friends, a senior collateral bank, where we all put some money in and we go around and we give loans to small companies like this, not microloans. You see, the microloans is to pat somebody on the head and say, you're a good kid, and you give $5,000. Now, mind you, I'd rather live with $5,000 than nothing, okay? So I don't want to diss it too much, but for a real business, you need a few $100,000 to a few $1 million of a loan. Like the guy with the pineapples, he needs $500,000, right? And then he can't get a loan, or he can get a loan at 120% interest a year. 120%. But he could get charity, or if he only wants to buy a cow, he can get up to $5,000 from microcredit. Or if he wants to buy a TV, they'll give him that too. But imagine if he gets $1 million, he would employ all these people. He can't get that. He would have to pay 120% interest. So we started this little bank, just a few of us, there's so bigger banks that this works, and we started to go around and give these loans, and we did this for 6 years, and we never had a default. And we were able to return 8% annually to our investors. Our loans were for about 12 to 13%. And here comes the kicker, that I couldn't get investments and other investors in the bank. It just had to be our own money. Because when I asked for investors, of the very people that you invest your money in, they said, well, it's for a place like Africa, that's too little return. You know, Africa's so screwed up. We'd need at least like 30 to 60% return, otherwise I can't do it. Why are they saying that? They're not saying that because of themselves. They're saying that because of us. What is your response? What is your expectation of how much return on money you want with your money? It's like saying, I don't like the stuff from China, but then go to Walmart and buy it there. It's an abdication of responsibility, of moral responsibility. You can't say I'm against child labor in China and go buy Nike, right? I couldn't find anybody to give us money, and 8% annual compound interest is a very good deal, guys. It's like that works really well. No, can't do that for Africa. This is why only 1.4% of the money that is looking for these kind of opportunities is going over there. So what I'm saying is we have to bring back the moral focus and the moral focus back to us individually. This isn't, somebody isn't going to come and fix this. This is a thing that we can, and this is what we talk about. It isn't a thing that you can point at somebody and say, go fix it. But we have to fix it. You have to fix this yourself. And that's what we talk about, solidarity with the poor. If one of these people loses dignity, we all have lost dignity.
Solidarity is enabling also the others. And it's, again, from the point of view where we start. We're not quite generally, there are always exceptions and enlightened people, but generally, we don't quite expect that Nigerians, Ghanaians, the lady in the fashion industry can actually sort it all out themselves. We don't need to the paternalistic attitude. And that's something that I find is not quite as widely shared as should be. I would like Cardinal Turkson to tell us in 2 minutes.
He's not here, actually.
He's right there on the screen. What he says about this applies to Africa.
Concretely now, I came to the Vatican in 2010. This was the midst of the financial crisis. And so we thought that it was our responsibility to provide a way of looking at this financial situation, and part of it was business, of course, banking and all of that. So one of the first things we did was to help and encourage the church to stop pointing accusing fingers at the world of business. So we produced a small booklet, which we call the Vocation of the Business Leader. And with that, invited business leaders to consider what they do in terms of a vocation. Now, vocation for us then is not limited to when people want to become priests or become brothers or nuns or whatever. But it's an invitation to business to recognize themselves in their transformative role of the resources available as co-creators, as partners with God, making the resources of nature serve the good of humanity. And so sometimes we put that concrete by saying God created a tree, God did not create furniture. It required business to transform trees into furniture, to transform minerals into whatever objects we use. So essentially, that's what we think a business is. It's a partner with God in bringing the resources of nature to the concrete use of humanity. And therefore, concrete, what a business can do, I think business therefore serves not only those who enable business people to work, so the investors, but also those who need to benefit from business, and so there's a very many different stakeholders. So this is what basically we encourage business to do. And sometimes, we have to encourage business people to recognize basically three things. To ensure that work itself is dignified, to ensure that wealth which they make is also good wealth, and to ensure that the customer relationship is also good. And we think when this is observed, then basically business fulfills a very dignified role in society.
How does business balance its responsibility to its stockholders with its responsibility to stakeholders, being humanity?
No, stakeholders enable business people to do what they do. They invest and bring in money to enable business CEOs to do business. But the character of business depends on more than those who bring in the money. If we're dealing with a mining company, for example, there is the place you go to, there are the people who live on the terrain, there are people whose lives will be transformed by the mining activity and who may be moved to one side or the other. So involved in this is just more than the investors, but also so we encourage more, if you want, a holistic view of business and its activity. At the end of the day, bottom line for us is that everything that happens should serve the well-being of the human person. And what we say, therefore, is that the human person is the only thing that God created for its own sake. Everything else was created for the well-being and to serve the human person. The human person is the one who was created not to serve anything else, but for its own sake, as it were.
I couldn't do too much of a film here after seeing an hour and a half of partying, but it's rather interesting in terms of business. It applies here, it applies around the world, but he had the example of the mining companies, so that we had a brief reference to that in the film as well. So our Canadian mining companies are quite active in East Africa in particular, and they're not by definition bad. But there is definitely an obligation to make the human person, the community, the environment, the more important consideration, not just the profit you gain from exploiting and depleting the resource out of in the ground. So I just wanted to share this with you.
I wanted, what we just heard, brings up another topic that is timely and relevant, and that is the global ambitions, the global presence of China. And the issue I want to get to is Andreas, I think you're arguing for a principle stepping back and letting African entrepreneurs be African entrepreneurs and grow and prosper. But you've also talked about connectedness. Another very Catholic word, we are connected. And one of the things we talked about beforehand is that China gets the story about China and Africa is mixed. And I found in Beijing, for example, that my Western colleagues tend to criticize China and Africa. The feedback from African colleagues, African diplomats, was different. Some were critical, some less so. So it's a complicated story, but there are problems associated with Africa, with Chinese investment in places like Africa, and there are problems associated with Chinese involvement in certain countries. That I can recall going to an event where the ambassador of Fiji, a country that has some issues around human rights, poked me in the chest and said, "We like China because unlike you guys, they lend us money and there are no strings attached, so we can just get on with it. So that's a long way of saying, is there a residual shared responsibility as fellow inhabitants of this planet to remain engaged, to have views on how conditions, how investment is being managed, the kind of strings that are attached, expectations that we all share for how people are treated as employees, how the environment is treated. Well, what's the residual responsibility, and I'd like to hear you on that.
So, these are very difficult questions. There's not exactly the good guy and the bad guy. These are complex issues. I'm a Westerner, and I'm very frustrated with our approach of the West to Africa. I see what we have done and not done in Africa, especially in Africa, in aid in general. And we've had 50 years to really develop or help develop Africa in a commercial sense. We haven't. And then the Chinese show up. And guess what they do? They start to develop commercially. And we're going, no, 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 you can't do that. And I'm like saying, well, this is sort of, we had the chance to do this for 50 years and we haven't done it. And maybe if the Chinese wouldn't show up, we would never do it. But why don't we let the Africans decide who they want in the country and what deals they want to make? And when I say hands off, what I mean is we have to allow, I'm not in America, so I can't say we fought a revolution to let a country keep its hands off us, to be independent and do our own thing. We did in Switzerland. We kicked out the Austrians.
We had a different take on that revolution.
Yeah, let me stick with Switzerland. And I wish that to others as well. And I enjoy seeing, it gives me joy to see Africa make its own decisions. And the more the locus of this goes away from us and to them, the better. Now, is China going to come in and behave like a Sunday school kid? No. But again, they're not stupid. One of the biggest faults we have in our brains and in our system is we look at a poor person, we think they're stupid. I tell you, it's hard to shake. One of the things I started to do with this hands-off thing, and I just need to get that off my chest quickly. I work in a school like this, and we have all these students who say, I want to go over to Africa, I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to go to Mexico, and this and that. And I say, no, nobody goes. Nobody leaves this country. As a matter of fact, nobody leaves Washington, D.C. Because I can open the door of my office and say, can you hear me? And there will be somebody who hears me who doesn't have a job, who doesn't have enough work, and who doesn't have enough to eat. And as long as we can't figure that out here, you kids have no business going into a plane, spending $3,000 to go help somebody if you can't even tie your shoes yet. That makes me angry, and in a way, we're doing the same thing, this paternalization, in the same way, if we're telling the Africans they can't handle the Chinese.
You're up, man.
Now we're starting to find.
No, in fact, I was, same story here. I mean, our indigenous peoples, they live in conditions that are worse than what I saw in Cameroon.
Yeah.
There are many, many who do, you saw wells that are being dug for clean water. Here in Canada, many live on reserves where there is no clean water. So, charité bien ordonnée commence par soi. What is it in English? I don't know, but I guess you got the drift of that.